Welcome to the Trademark channel, where we bring you the latest information concerning trademarks. Today we bring you information on the introduction of non-traditional trademarks. In recent years, along with developments in digital technology, there has been an increase in the number of cases in which brand image is communicated via television or the internet as part of a branding strategy breaking the language barrier. However, the conventional system for trademarks only applies to things such as characters, figures, or three-dimensional shapes. And things such as motion marks, colors, and sounds could not receive protection as trademarks.
Meanwhile, taking a look globally, sounds and colors are protected as trademarks in countries such as America, England, Germany, France, Korea, and Australia. Protection for these non-traditional trademarks is becoming a global trend.
So a system of protection for these non-traditional trademarks has also been introduced in Japan. Mr. Mine, what types of trademarks have been introduced?
There are 5 non-traditional trademarks that have been introduced: motions, holograms, colors, sounds, and positions.
One Japanese company has already registered a non-traditional trademark overseas. This company has registered a sound as a trademark. Let's take a look at non-traditional trademarks using this company as an example.
You've probably heard this sound in commercials. The sound, which is called a sound logo, has been registered as a trademark overseas by Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical. Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical recognizes that the trademark is the brand and believes that trademarks have the role of symbols that market the image of a company and its goods as a brand.
A trademark is a symbol of brand value. People look at trademarks to see whether a brand is authentic or not when they decide to buy things. So in that sense, the trademark is the brand. And it is an important piece of intellectual property in creating and maintaining that. A trademark is an extremely important symbol in order for a brand to be understood and known.
Trademarks communicate brand value. Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical believes that trademarks also have the role of a communication tool. Accordingly, they believe that due to the diversification of communication accompanying technological progress, protecting sounds and motions as trademarks is important.
I think that nowadays, trademarks have the function of communicating. That is, enabling communication between companies and their customers. As you know, the internet has become popular recently. And of course, media such as television and radio are also on the rise. So when you think about that, and about things like motions and sounds also functioning as trademarks, having a so-called communication function, I guess, well, that is now possible.
Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical is expanding business operations globally. Because of this, it was important to protect the sound logo by registering it as a trademark.
Well, sound marks are used in things like advertising, and advertising costs a lot of money, an enormous amount of money. In order to preserve that use, if we can't turn that into a right using the trademark right system, then we can't safely use the trademark. So, in that sense, I think the protection of non-traditional trademarks is necessary.
Advertising costs a large amount of money, and this is why Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical believes that it's important to obtain the rights for new trademarks, such as sounds and motions, and avoid having them imitated. Furthermore, Hisamitsu Pharmaceuticals believes that there is another large effect of this other than just avoiding imitation.
you have to obtain a trademark in order to avoid being imitated. Well, that is certainly on the one hand an important way of looking at it. But when you think about the true nature of trademarks, then I think what is really important is the right to use. By obtaining the exclusive right, that is a trademark right, a company can safely provide goods and services. If that right to use didn't exist, then they couldn't confidently develop their product lines. So, it is because of the right to use that goods can be safely provided and large amounts of money can be spent on advertising. That's what I believe.
Through registration, a company can use its trademarks anywhere and safely expand its business operations. Hisamitsu Pharmaceutical believes that being able to turn these trademarks into rights and proactively making use of these non-traditional trademarks will become increasingly important to companies.
It seems that the non-traditional trademarks are also seeing proactive use.
That's right. As you could see in the video, there are currently many forms of trademarks that are appearing on the scene. Proactively making use of the system that protects these non-traditional trademarks will probably be extremely important for businesses.
Well then, let's talk about the system for the non-traditional trademarks in a little more detail. Joining us here in the studio is Mr. Sato of the Japan Patent Office. Welcome, Mr. Sato.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Getting straight to the point, with respect to the newly introduced system of protection for non-traditional trademarks, could you tell us about what kinds of things can be registered?
Yes. Under the pre-existing Trademark Act, things that could be registered as trademarks were limited to characters, figures, and three-dimensional shapes, or a combination of any of these, or a combination of these and colors. But as Mr. Mine mentioned earlier, in addition to these, one will also be able to register motions, holograms, colors, sounds, and positions as trademarks.
I see. So with the new system, 5 types can be registered as non-traditional trademarks. Could you explain in a little more detail about each of them, starting with motions?
Of course. Things like moving characters or figures can be registered as a trademark called motion mark. I imagine you would see them a lot in TV commercials, and the target of protection is the changing of the characters or figures as time passes.
Next then, what are holograms?
A hologram is, for example, something like this. Things like figures, appearing to look different depending on the viewing angle, can be registered as a trademark called hologram mark.
Apparently, we can also register a color as a trademark. What do they mean by color?
Well, before, only characters or figures with color were able to be registered as trademarks. But one will also be able to register colors per se. An example would be something like colors used in wrapping paper or in advertisement signs. In addition to individual colors, combinations of colors are also a target of protection for the color per se mark. For example, in Australia, 7-Eleven Incorporated has registered 3 horizontal stripes in the colors orange, green, and red on a white or neutral background as a color per se mark.
And how about sound marks?
Yes. Sound includes things like sound logos used in commercials or startup sounds for PCs. For example, the Windows startup sound is registered as a trademark in places such as the US.
Now, it's hard to imagine what position might mean. What kinds of things does it indicate?
Well, a position mark is when there is something like a figure in a specific position on a product. For example, even though the figure is simple, seeing that the figure is always placed in the same position the consumers are able to recognize that the product is from a specific company.
Is there anything you have to pay attention to when actually applying for one of the 5 non-traditional trademarks you've just explained to us?
There is. When applying for a non-traditional trademark on the request for a trademark application, in addition to the currently existing items, you need to include the following information. First, you have to enter the type of trademark, such as sound mark or color per se mark, so it can be understood what kind of non-traditional trademark you are applying for. You also need to state a description of mark in order to explain the non-traditional trademark. For sound marks, the description of mark is not required, but you need to write a musical score or an explanation in the column for the trademark in which you are seeking registration, and attach an audio file. The scopes of the rights of the non-traditional trademarks will be determined taking all of these into account.
Is there any change to the fees for registering a non-traditional trademark?
No. The cost for registering a non-traditional trademark is the same as for registering conventional trademarks.
That was an explanation of the non-traditional trademarks. Finally, can you tell us what kinds of effects you can envisage from the introduction of the protection system for these trademarks?
Yes. As is the case with conventional types of trademarks, by registering a non-traditional trademark, you will gain the rights to demand injunction against infringement activities or demand compensation for damages. Also, by utilizing the Madrid Protocol, you will be able to apply for trademarks in many countries at once with a single application. This will make registering trademarks overseas much easier compared to before.
Registering non-traditional trademarks will also enable a safer expansion of brand strategy, won't it?
That's correct. The trademark system protects the intellectual property of companies, so please make use of it.
And that was our discussion of the non-traditional trademarks, with explanations from Mr. Sato of the Japan Patent Office. Thank you.